Amora Blaine Carson was a 13-month-old baby girl, who was tortured to death by her mother Jessica Carson and her boyfriend, Blaine Milam, during a supposed exorcism. Jessica Carson was sentenced to life in prison without parole, while Blaine Milam, who was found to be the main perpetrator, was sentenced to death and currently sits on death row. Blaine Keith Milam was scheduled to be executed on January 21, 2021, at the Walls Unit of the Huntsville State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas. However, his execution has been stayed. Blaine has been on death row in Texas for the past 15 years. Blaine dropped out of school after the 4th grade. He was not working at the time of his arrest, although he had worked previously. According to Blaine's mother, Blaine stopped maturing emotionally at the age of 12. He used methamphetamine off and on. Blaine tried to take his own life twice after the death of his father. At the time of the murder, Blaine did not have a prior prison record, however he was on probation for solicitation of aggravated sexual assault of a child under the age of 14. Blaine Milam and Jessica Carson met in January 2008 and became engaged on prom night. When they met, Jessica had recently had her child Amora with another man. Shortly after becoming engaged, Carson moved in with Milam. At 10:37 a.m., on December 2, 2008, police received an emergency call from Milam. His words were, "My name is Blaine Milam, and my daughter, I just found her dead." By the time police arrived 20 minutes later, 2 ambulances were already at the scene. Milam and Carson were kneeling over an infant on the floor. The first responding police officer observed that the baby was bruised and not breathing or moving. Another police officer arrived, and Milam and Carson were separated for questioning. Milam told the police that the couple had left the child sleeping in order to walk up the road to talk to a man about clearing some land for them. They returned approximately 1 hour later, stating that they found the baby in that condition. Milam was cooperative with the police and gave consent for the search of his car and home. A Texas Ranger then interviewed Milam. Milam claimed that he and Carson had found Amora in a hole in the bathroom floor, which was being remodeled. He also claimed Amora was still alive when he called the police, which contradicts what he said to the operator during that 911 call. Milam later changed his story again, saying that Carson called the police before they had found the baby. He then also said that when they found Amora, she was dead. Milam denied any involvement in the death of Amora. By the end of their conversation and the constant changing of Blaine's version of events, the Texas Ranger considered Milam a suspect. The Texas Ranger also interviewed Carson. At first, Carson was crying and acting very distraught. However, she then drastically changed her demeanor. She started referring to Amora as that baby, and told the ranger a story he described as extremely bizarre. When police talked to the man that Blaine Milam and Jessica Carson said they had met with that morning about clearing some land, he denied any meeting with them. A search of the trailer revealed extensive DNA evidence. It indicated that it was highly unlikely that Amora was killed anywhere else. The medical examiner in the case testified that the injuries to Amora were extensive, making it impossible to determine an exact cause of death. Many of the injuries would have been fatal on their own. Numerous bites were also discovered on Amora's body. An expert was able to testify with a reasonable degree of dental certainty that several of the bite marks were from Milam. Carson was excluded from all but one of the bite marks. Milam's brother was also tested. He did not match any of the bite marks. During Milam's trial, his attorneys focused on Carson as the murderer. Milam's trial had to be moved from Rusk County, where the murder occurred, to Montgomery County, due to the notoriety of the case. In May 2010, Milam was found guilty of capital murder, and the court sentenced him to death. 1 year later, Carson was also found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During Carson's trial, she alleged that Milam was controlling and violent. Additionally, she alleged that at the time of Amora's death, Milam was performing an exorcism on the girl. Carson claimed that Amora was like a child from a horror movie, like Chucky or Pet Sematary. She claimed that Amora was evil and would bite Blaine and draw blood from his hands. To cure Amora, Blaine performed an exorcism. During the exorcism, Milam had taken the child to a back bedroom in their small dwelling and wedged the door shut. The evidence would allow a jury to conclude that Carson was aware of what was happening to the child, because she admitted hearing screams that would accompany torture. Carson heard horrible cries from the child as Milam was attempting the so-called exorcism. She also heard the sounds caused by the blows that landed on Baby Amora. Police found blood spatter stains, consistent with blunt force trauma, near the south bedroom. Among the items collected from the south bedroom were blood-stained bedding and baby clothes, blood-stained baby diapers and wipes, a tube of Astroglide lubricant, and a pair of jeans with blood stains on the lap. DNA testing later showed that it was Amora's blood that was on these items. As a result of this exorcism conducted by Milam, Amora suffered innumerable injuries that led to her death. Forensic evidence showed the child was beaten so severely that the multitude of fractures to her skull, connected with each other like a jigsaw puzzle, her brain was torn and severely damaged, and her head was severely deformed. An arm and leg had spiral fractures, indicating they were twisted in two, and her torso was either struck by a blunt object, or squeezed until the ribs and sternum broke. Amora's neck, chest, abdomen, buttocks, both elbows, both forearms, both feet, right arm, left shoulder, left upper arm, left hand, right thigh, and left knee, were riddled with no less than 24 distinct bite marks. Her head and face were so scraped and bruised that all the discrete injuries combined into one giant injury. Her liver was torn. Amora's vaginal and anal orifices were also so torn that the vagina and rectum were connected, an injury the forensic examiner said he had never seen before. The underside of her tongue was lacerated from blunt force trauma. She had also been strangled. Because of all the injuries she sustained, it was not possible to determine which one was the final injury, and no specific, singular cause of death was determinable. Forensic testimony reflected that several of the injuries standing alone would have each been fatal. Forensics also showed that police were called several hours later, not immediately as the defendants had claimed, and when they arrived, the child was entirely stiff and already in rigor. It doesn't end there. On December 13th, Blaine's sister, Teresa, went to see him in jail. That night, she told her aunt that she needed to find a way to get back out to the trailer, because Blaine had told her that she needed to go out there to get some evidence out from underneath it. The aunt called Sergeant Rogers and said that Teresa was wanting to go out there to get some evidence for Blaine. Sergeant Rogers immediately obtained a search warrant, crawled under the trailer, and discovered a pipe wrench inside a clear plastic bag. The pipe wrench had been shoved down a hole in the floor of the master bathroom. Forensic analysis revealed components of Astroglide on the pipe wrench, which had also been found on the diaper Amora had been wearing, and the diaper and wipes collected from the south bedroom during their initial search. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals stayed the execution of Blaine Milam over concerns regarding his mental competency. He remains on death row. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like and subscribe for more content just like this, and hit the bell icon, and we'll let you know every time we upload a new video. Thanks for watching.